So with regard to talent management, it's the sum of the person's abilities, instincts, gifts, skills, knowledge, experience, judgment, attitude, character and drive. It's, talent management is a function of, which focuses on acquiring and developing and retaining that talent. And the other thing is that it's going to be different almost for every person. Not everybody is the same. And I think that is often lost. Organisations have become increasingly convinced that successful talent management is fundamental to maximising organisational performance. So if you can move your talent and create a workforce and an organisation that utilises on those people's talents, the correlation back to engagement, whole range of things occur. So I thought I'd share with you some comments and from some recent forum on talent and where people globally are actually seeing talent technology terminology move to. Talent intelligence, which is really that how do you identify this potential? Exactly how do you do it in a way, how do you find those people for the critical roles? And the critical roles are actually becoming more complex. Talent capitalisation, the fair and the equal piece. When I go through the case study, the fair and the equal piece is very, very important within organisations. Now, Chatham House rules, but a place where I used to work, our talent identification was we all got in a room and we all argued about who should go 1 up or 2 up. And of course, the managers didn't have those conversations with their employees, or most didn't, and it generally decided on the EGM, the GM, making the final decision about who they liked. And that's the issue about the politics within organisation. But I do remember somebody, a very astute CEO once said to me, at the end of the day, when I was questioned about who should go up and who shouldn't, he said, Shayne, I always looked at their last appraisal. And the person wasn't going to move up got a good appraisal across everything. So this issue about transparency and truly identifying is always going to be there, and politics is always going to be there. So really the role of this is to equalise the field and make it as fair as possible. And talent mobility. If people are in large complex organisations, people get pigeonholed. One of the brightest women I ever worked with, her boss didn't move her around the business. She eventually left, but he wouldn't move her around the business because I think she really covered up, in many cases, his incompetence. So what do? They talent hoard. I've got my little group. I'm not going to give them the opportunity to move out. And I think that's a really important, and it's important when you're talking to managers about saying you can't hoard your talent. It's the whole of organisation, not my one little area. So what are some of the key areas in relation to talent management affecting the Australian labour force at the moment, and the challenges of the ageing population, the continuing technological change, skills shortage, multi-generational values? It is quite complex. We are talking about moving into the future of work, as Thomas says. It is a more complex environment than it was 10 years ago. So what are some of the organisations doing? They're creating flexible workplaces. It's been around for a long time. Ongoing training. 52% of organisations offer succession management programs. And a large number of return on investment studies have been done, particularly where it can be measured. Recruitment management, aligning the company's competencies, motivational, cultural fit is becoming more of an issue. It's this issue about engagement. I don't really think, and when we've been running talent programs or advising clients on talent programs, a number of organisations and consulting firms will say, just do the HPI and just do the HDS. Yet the biggest issue is retention. I just don't get it. So, influencing to put that balance of the culture is very, very important there. So the ageing workforce, apart from the fact that we might all be working a little bit longer, particularly those of you that are younger than me, will continue to be an issue in Australia. And part of that is also going to be attracting new people into roles in quite a tight labour market. Skill shortage. There is no doubt that there is a shortage of skills, the need to train and continue to train going forward. And also the Gen Ys. They are going to be, and the millenniums are going to expect different things. As Thomas said in a presentation yesterday, he said, at the end of the day, your employees now feel like they want a customer experience. It's a slightly different environment to what it was, the world of work from 20 years ago. So they like to see that as a positive experience. The other thing is, having managed a lot of service workers in my day, I think there is this thing called disengagement or service guilt. If the company says they're going to do something, they're going to deliver to the customer, they're going to actually deliver something to you, to pick up the point about engagement surveys, and they don't do it, that is worse than not doing it. And particularly, there's a terminology of service guilt. You relate more to the customer than you do with the organisation. You apologise. You lose your sense, that ability to detach around that service guilt. So let's now look at a global talent management program. We have done this program with very, very senior talent management program. We're talking about partner level, and we've also done it with emerging talent globally as well. So the objective in this case was to provide development and succession for key staff who are either individual contributors, subject matter experts, or people leaders. In this particular organisation, they had identified that all of those were actually important, not just the people leaders. Managers had to play an active role in the program, undertaking training, coaching and developing their key staff. Oh my God, that was a hassle. Just getting them to interviews and into programs because they're very busy, because they're in that operational zone. The third one was that the participants would be provided with holistic, transparent feedback about the opportunities, undertake development as a high potential group, and create realistic development plans which would integrate back into the business, the normal business appraisal process. And the plans would need to be supported by their manager and or mentor. So the organisation had an opportunity to give the people managers and mentors. The outcome, improve engagement by participants and retention and development of key staff. And I like this word, develop a rich career plan. At the end of the day, there had to be joint ownership between the organisation and the individuals around that richness of the plan. So let's look at the phases here. The first phase was actually, who is this person, the career snapshot. We used the Hogan assessment and we did talent interviews. Phase 2, the training piece. And phase 3, the development journey. It doesn't start and finish. It's a journey. And I think that's another very important message with high potentials, talent, succession. It's a journey. It doesn't start and finish. So let's look at the assess part. Now, this was really interesting. The organisation would assisted us with the career snapshots, and we have a nice little photo of the person, because after you do a few of these, they all start to blend in a little bit, just a little bit. You know, their start date with the organisation, who their line manager is, a whole lot of important information. Most of it was wrong. It was actually, and it came out of the human resource database. And we're talking about a very prestigious global company, a company that in this case operates globally. You'd ask the manager in the interviews, when I get to it, you know, is this person mobile? The manager would say, no, they've got 2 kids. They'd say, oh yeah, I'm mobile, this is where I'd like to go. What we found by the career, even their previous work history, prior to joining the company, someone in HR in some of the areas didn't think that was relevant, right? Very important. So who is this person? That career snapshot is really important to get the good data that person knows when the manager's talking to them, and also when you're conducting interviews, that you know something about them. And the interesting part was how little the managers actually knew. So the Hogan 360, the Hogan assessments, plus we used Matrigma and the HBRI, and hopefully for the next round of this it'll be the judgment report going forward. That gave us a really good understanding about the individual. We then did biographical interviews with the individuals and biographical and interviews with their managers. Even the career aspirations that the managers thought they had, what they were saying wasn't aligned. To the point where in some of the manager interviews, having done some of the interviews with the participants, we actually said, why have you nominated this person on a talent and potential high potential program? When I've asked you where you see him in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, and you've just told me doing the same job, if they weren't a subject matter expert. Why are they on this program? Had to nominate someone? You know, it varied. So this was an important part of getting the views, and we distilled it down to very much dot points. Now, I really like this about the business relevance. So we could actually get hard business data, and that was about business. In this particular case, it's about customers, organisational processes and people, and rating them using a traffic light, using data that the organisation has. Now, not all organisations will have that, and it will be different depending on the organisation for your reference, but in this particular one, we did have that data. And here is the good old talent matrix. So, been around a long time, a lot of people still use it, and, you know, putting people into these relevant boxes. What was interesting, we got the HR director in one of the projects to get the CEO to put people in where he thought they were on the box. Then we provided to the CEO and actually a board member who was on the board people subcommittee the data, and people moved because the first time ever they actually had a full snapshot of that person's performance versus their potential. And what was interesting was they had a very, very skilled subject matter expert here, over here, that they moved to there. Because what we managed to get out of the interviews was that pretty much he didn't want to move anywhere, but he had enormous knowledge within the business. So, you know, the opportunity existed for him to have a legacy of leaving that knowledge behind and take on a mentor role, which, to be honest, he hadn't thought of himself in that same way. So it was a really good opportunity. So you can see there, this is when you pull it all together. Talent profile, career snapshot, business performance, strengths tables, and at the back, the summary of the Hogan results with a very brief summary of the person's strengths and opportunities. Is that any of their profile? Okay, so now the train part. Obviously, the Hogan assessments. The Hogan 360, this is what the individuals experienced. Employee development plan using, in this particular case, the organisation used the 70% experience, 20% exposure and 10% education. And that was the supporting desktop reference was customised depending on the level within the organisation. Obviously, they didn't want everybody running off to INSEAD or, you know, oh, yes, I'm on the high potential program. You know, maybe a couple of months at Harvard would be a good idea. So very much, and this had to be agreed with the manager, whether they support it. So we're very cunningly forcing the manager to have those hard conversations. And the train, where we are now, so that train part is the Hogan, the employee development workshop, we focused on that, then the manager as a coach for the purpose of developing talent. Now we get into the development journey, and remember I said this is a journey, right? And that development journey is very, very much customised between the individual and actually their manager. What's going to happen? HR have or organisational development have an overview of what they're doing, but it's very, very much customised around that. And a good example of this is there was one fantastic guy, he was the smartest person in the room. He's actually within this organisation on 3 different talent programs. One to be a potential head of, we're talking about CEO of, you know, a very, very large, another one within his division, and one as a subject matter expert, the subject matter expert. So he's on 3 talent programs. The most interesting feedback he got was from his 360. So his 360 provided his managers information about him and his one-up managers information about him. And he had no idea, and they looked completely different. Of course, he was the smartest guy in the room, but when he got into business meetings, senior meetings, he had a fear of public speaking. Not because he couldn't, because he could speak going down, was that fear of failure, that high cautious, very, very bright, but he didn't want to make a mistake. Low adjustment, high competence, low adjustment, worried about making that mistake. So in his case, he's off to NIDA for 2 weeks, right? Because the 2-up manager said, who ultimately will determine his career, said in his 360, I know there's so much more he can give. He needs to contribute at a senior level at all the meetings. I feel he holds back, I'm not sure, because he thinks he's smarter than us, and that just completely blindsided him. He had no idea that that was the case. So when you're using 360s, having the ability to do up the 2-up manager as well as the 1-up manager in talent, I would strongly recommend that you do that. Because not in all cases, but if that is available, I would strongly recommend. We've found enormous benefit in these programs doing that. So the ongoing performance is the development journey. Follow-up 360 is planned, and program reviews. You know, process of the organisation, 360 degree. The workshop really brought it all together. This is what actual feedback from the workshops. The 360, the debriefing session was very useful. So this is what the participants themselves, at the end of this program, we went to every single manager via a survey and every single individual to find out exactly what their experience was as a result of being selected on the program. You know, there were some really good insights. We needed to know more about the whole of the process up front. And this was quite a complex program because it involved quite people from overseas as well as in Australia. So that's the process: assess, train, and the performance journey. So I think the take home here is having the actual analysis and analytics to support the gut feeling, and actually forcing the managers to support the reason why they've said that about the person really pulls it together. Also, it has a strong business connection. If the managers, if they feel that they're going to get better employees, more engaged, more productive employees as a result of the talent and the hypo experience, they'll support it more, because what's in it for them? An easier person to manage. Growing the talent responsibly for the individual and the managers. And performance and development. But we learned a lot about these people, and the managers through this process learned a hell of a lot about the people that they hadn't had the time to sit down and talk and have those meaningful discussions with.